Okay, so I'm not sure if I got this idea from one of your videos or from something I read. It might have been the Krishnamurti video, but there's this idea that um, thought creates separation. There's
Okay. Yeah. I mean, that's a way of phrasing it. Yeah. I think that sounds like Krishnamurti.
yeah, uh, and so I've been trying to. Well, I took a bit of time to think about it. Is thought the only thing that creates separation? Is it is
No.
it
Physical pain can do that. Anything that causes someone to
how so?
contract. Now, thought, if you attend to it, causes separation. Anything that causes one to contract into a smaller being will create separation.
What does that mean to contract into a smaller being?
Well, it's really not contracting into a smaller being, it's contracting into a smaller mind. So as I sit here, my mind is as broad as the sky. It includes trees and clouds and birds and leaves and grasses and flowers. It's a wide open mind with all kinds of things in it, including you, including this my voice, right? It's just an object in consciousness. But
Hmm.
I to have pain, or where I to focus on a particular thought or think about what I'm saying or something like that, then that would cause more separation, depending on
But
how intense the pain was, I suppose.
what even is the separation?
The separation is the illusion that you exist independently of this universe and everything in it. That's the separation. It's that illusion. The illusion is the separateness.
But that illusion is is created like is it's present in thought, right? It's present in the I am this, I'm not that. Is it also present in some other form of perception?
Any thought, but especially the thought, the I thought, the I am this, I am that. Ask the question again in
So
another way.
sep- this separation, the illusion of separation is, could we say, like manifested in some way, right? It's not just an idea, it's a somewhat reality.
Yeah.
But
Do you know
that
what a Markov blanket is by any chance?
I have a vague idea.
All right. It's the boundary between something that exists and the environment. Okay. So in order for a
Hmm.
rock to exist, there must be a boundary between that rock and the air.
Mm.
For a building to exist, there must be a boundary between its structure, or there must appear to be a boundary between its structure and the outside world,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
But where one draws that boundary is arbitrary, and
Hmm.
one can loosen that boundary because consciousness is larger than thought.
Right.
So the thought, I exist as a separate individual, is a thought within a much larger ocean of consciousness,
Hmm.
a cosmos of consciousness, if you, as you were. So that thought, your body, that building, that rock, they exist within consciousness. And one can identify with you can identify with your foot, you could identify with your head, you could identify with your whole body, or you could choose not to identify with any of those particularly and just open the consciousness up. And then your body, your foot, your head, the rock, the building, all become objects within consciousness,
Hmm.
presuming they're in your presence, right? Otherwise, they're in
Hmm.
memory or fantasy.
But that identification, is it like a spatial awareness that's in addition to thought?
If you were truly spatially aware, you wouldn't have the problem as much, because if you're truly spatial aware, you're aware of all of the space. You're not just aware of the space that you happen to be attending to at the moment with your thought. So when you say spatial awareness, are you talking about spatial orientation or perspective or what?
Like perspective, like I can imagine a boundary of my body without thought, right? It's like a spatial
Oh, really? What's the boundary of your body
perception.
without thought? Is the air
Well,
in
I
your
can
lungs?
imagine.
Is the air in your lungs you?
I'm not saying it's me. I can
The
imagine
majority of your
this
cells,
separation.
I'm not sure about this, I keep going back and forth, but I believe the majority of cells in your body are not even human. They're backed by microbial. Are those you?
I'm not. I'm not. That's thought though. If I'm saying space, like if I just use spatial perception
Okay,
in
then
3D space, I can
all right. Then
I can.
how large is your back?
It can only be measured in relative terms.
Okay, relative to the room.
Relative to the room, it's, I don't know, 1/20th of the width of the room.
Why did you decide on that being your back? Why not the room? Habit. See, you're localizing your consciousness within between. Where are you local? Did you listen to the last video?
Hmm.
All right, where are you localizing your consciousness? I think you're saying what you're saying out of habit and because your eyes are in front of your head and your ears are on the side of your head.
Hmm.
But those are organs of perception. So you're identifying with the body, your ears and your eyes, and your feet and your arms. But you don't have to do that. And as a matter of fact, that's actually wrong if you want to get to the truth of the matter.
Hmm.
Because your body, like any idea, will come and go. You tell me the difference between a tree and the thought of a tree, or a rock and the thought of a rock. What's the difference?
Um, well, the thought of the tree is limited, um, and it's like a projection of perceptions.
Okay, so you're driving down the road and you see a tree.
Hmm.
How is that not what you just described? It's limited and it's a projection.
Hmm. But presumably behind that, there's
Presumably, don't presume anything. Presumably, what? What do you presume is behind that image? Use your
well, there
best
could be
science.
an
Use your best science here.
well, I mean, our science would say there's like an organic entity that's made up of cells, and there's the perception is created by the light
Okay, that's
bouncing off.
biology. Keep going. Go down to the chemistry now. What is it?
A bunch of molecules,
and enzyme sugar.
atoms,
Now
and
go to the physics.
well, you see the photons bouncing off the
Reflected light, right? And what are the photons?
mhm,
What are the photons?
energy
Okay, or light. Those are both just
or
words.
light.
Okay, so what?
Yeah,
Now, what is a thought made of?
I don't know, consciousness.
It requires some energy, but okay. So I guess what we're trying to do here, first of all, we need to decide. You need to decide what you think this world is made of. What do you think this pencil is made of, really? Because otherwise, you're just going by your high school science. You know, your high school physics, etc. Or they say, well, it's
Hmm.
made of wood. But we want to go deeper to that. We don't want to make any assumptions about something so important, right?
Hmm.
So what's it made of? At the at the atomic level, what's it made of? Are there really little balls that we call atoms floating around that make up the universe? Are you an atomist? Are you someone who believes
I
a
don't
bunch
know.
of little marbles make up the world?
I couldn't say.
Well, you got to get that straight first if we want to talk about it in logical terms, or in scientific terms, or even in philosophical terms. You got to have your worldview set. Otherwise, I can't. I'm not here to try and convince you that this world is illusory. You need to discover that for yourself. And so this
Yeah,
work, I
I
mean, you
mean,
can do Dharma work, but you can also do science work, and you'll end up in the same place.
mm,
Which is true. I mean, it hasn't been true for a long time. I mean, it was true in the old days, in the time of Parmenides and Plato, Heraclitus, and oh, that other guy that's so great. Nothing moves. Who is that? Oh, I said Parmenides. I meant Pythagoras. And Pythagoras. So, all right. So you have a worldview that you got from somewhere that says that the world's made up of these tiny little objects, and they all fit together to make these living things. And those little
mhm.
things fit together to make these living things, and those living things create consciousness. That's what it sounds like you're telling me.
Well, I didn't say that.
I know that, but it sounds like you're assuming that. Otherwise, what is the world
Um,
made of? What is the world made of?
mm, something like conscious energy.
Is conscious energy divisible?
Well, what do you mean by divisible?
Can you divide it into smaller components? Can it be reduced?
It, I don't know. It seems infinite.
If it's infinite, I mean, we'll use the word loosely. I
Hmm.
mean, it's either divisible or it's not divisible. Either it can be subdivided or not.
Well, it could have the capability of appearing
Appearing, yes,
divisible.
appearing.
Hmm.
Now, I don't want to be in the business of trying to convince you what the world is made of. I think that's a scientific question. But we can do a little
Right.
thought, an analogy, a metaphor, a simile. Okay, you go to sleep, you dreamed out you're walking down the street in Buenos Aires, right? There's a building, there's a
Hmm.
tree, there's a woman on the other side of the street. How many parts are there in that dream, really?
What do you
Um,
mean?
Is it divisible or is it one dream? See, the other problem is that I think you're still believing in space and time. I mean, it's totally excusable, right? I mean, you were brought up with all of that.
Hmm.
But what about the space and time thing? Do you believe those are inherently inherent properties of our universe?
Um,
Or do you
if I
believe that
think
is in a
about it,
dream? Okay, if you think about it, go ahead.
it, well, if I think about it, then well, I know well, there's quantum physics that tells me that the conventional view of space and time is not scientifically correct,
Yeah, that's
and
right. That's
then
right. So you got to. I mean, either are we going to consider science at all, or I mean, see,
and there
I
you
can
could.
either take quantum physics for granted, right, which I think I should be able to do by 2024, right? I mean, it's been demonstrated
Mhm.
over and over and over.
Yeah,
There's no
yeah, yeah.
dispute. Okay, so all right. So now, what do we know about time and space?
Um,
Let's take spooky action at a distance. You know what that is, right? Why don't you look it up real
I
quick?
have very basic
All right, look it
understanding.
up and explain it to the audience. This was the
Okay.
thing that freaked Einstein out so much.
This is quantum entanglement.
Okay,
It's a phenomenon of a group of particles being generated, interacting or sharing spatial proximity in such a way that the quantum state of each particle of the group cannot be described independently of the state of the others, including when the particles are separated by a large distance.
by a large distance. So locality did not hold. In other words, the particles could be on separate sides of the planet or separate sides of the cosmos. It doesn't matter.
Hmm.
So there's no
Right.
the effects are not local, but they're entangled. They might as well be
Right.
the same thing. See, I can't I can't move this end of the pencil without moving that end of the pencil. It can't be done because they're all the same thing, right? Similarly,
Mm.
you have a particle, whether say a positive, an upspin and a downspin or something. You can't flip one without flipping the other, and it's instantaneous. They're the same thing. Okay, so
No matter how far apart they are.
analogous, similar
Hmm.
in metaphor as a simile to a dream, right? It's one thing, is it not? It just appears to be different things. And how much is space or time conserved in a dream? Okay, so the question is, how much is space conserved in a dream? So if you walk down 2 city blocks of Buenos Aires in your dream at night when you're asleep, how much space did that actually take?
I mean,
Right,
none
you
of.
could have walked to Paris or flown to Paris, same difference. Because space is not fundamental.
Sorry, my phone was acting up.
Because space is not fundamental, it's emergent in the dream. Now, same thing with time. How long would it take to walk from Buenos Aires to Lima, Peru? In your dream, it could take what, 15 seconds?
Mm.
Because time, neither is time conserved, but you still have the illusion of both time and space when you're asleep and dreaming.
Hmm.
God gave us these big, huge, fat clues as to what the universe is like. Thankfully. Okay, so in an analogous way, I'm asking you to describe what you call the real world, which I say is a world of consciousness with objects in it. But it sounds to me like you want to hold on to the idea that there's something concrete and real and that we can grab our hands onto in this world.
Well, my question is, in a dream, these things are emergent, and it's easy to see that they're illusions, right? There's
Correct.
no,
Correct. Yeah.
but when I'm awake, there seems to be some like rules, right? Where like mm, I I can't, if I want to go to Buenos Aires, it's not going to take 15 seconds
By whose clock?
by anybody's clock.
Okay, so now we have to go to Einstein, back to the prior century. How long
Hmm.
something is in time is entirely relative.
Mm.
So if you're moving, like, did you see the spacewalk? The recent.
Yeah,
Okay, how fast was that satellite moving while they were out there in space?
I don't know.
I think it was many thousands of miles. Why don't you ask? Let's just find out.
Hmm.
How fast was the satellite moving? Or the space shuttle, or whatever you want to call it, the capsule. The Dragon space shuttle.
25,000 kilometers per hour.
Okay, 25,000 kilometers per hour. So that's what, about 12,500 miles an hour?
15,000 and a half.
15,000 miles an hour.
Hmm. Pretty
So when
fast.
he raises his hand and touches his forehead, how fast is his arm moving?
Relative to what?
Exactly. So you said it took 15 minutes, or how long? 15 hours to get to Buenos Aires. But 15 hours is completely arbitrary and relative measurement. You're talking about relative to people that are sitting on the ground. You're not talking to the space shuttle, because of the space shuttle, that thing took no time at all. Assuming it's going in the same direction, so on and so forth. So time, we know from Einstein, from the last century, it's all relative, right?
It,
And as you approach the speed of light, then there's no time at all, right? And we know that in astrophysics, classical physics falls apart in black holes. And we know that in subatomic physics, that time and space fall apart when you get to the Planck length. You know what the Planck length is?
it's the smallest unit of measurable time or space or both.
Space or time, depending on how you want to
Something.
define it. Because space and time are just like two aspects of the same coin.
Right.
Okay? So the Buenos Aires thing, we're going to have to say that measurement of time is completely arbitrary. 15 seconds,
Mm.
1,500 years. This is where the flower ornament comes in so handy, because you know that in the world called Enchanted Emerald Forest, an eon is a day and a night in the world of diamond banners with perfumed fragrances. So that's what I mean. Exactly
Mm.
what I mean by it will teach your mind to be able to grok these things
What about
much more
what?
efficiently than going through all this, details of quantum mechanics at the moment.
Right. What about something like gravity, where in a dream there's there is gravity, but then it's easy to like break it, or to not have it anymore if you try to fly, for example.
How much
But
gravity did you saw the spacewalk? How much gravity was there?
but that's like a
It's like a
it's a
better experiment
consistent.
because it's not right next to a big massive planet.
But it's like
Okay, tell me what gravity
it
is.
seems to follow rules, right? It seems to follow rules where
Oh, there are
if you're in
rules. There are
space,
rules. There are rules. I didn't say there were no
so
rules.
where do the rules come from?
Where does mathematics come from?
Mathematics just seems to describe
No, where does it come
a
from?
set of rules.
Okay, but where
It
does
comes from
mathematics go?
it comes from observing the world. And
Okay, so there's some rules in the world that we're living in this world endurance.
but if everything's an illusion, how can there be rules? Like,
That's a good question. To answer that, That, that really had Plato and Aristotle going at it for a while.
Mm.
There just seems to be. It's like, how can we be
Because
here? How can we be here? That doesn't make any sense. How could we exist in the middle of cosmic space? What is it? Almost 14 billion years, light years across. These are enormous distances. How can we possibly be here? Hairless monkeys with consciousness that allows us to know God. How can that possibly be? Well, it just is. That's beyond our capacity as little monkeys.
well, the thought goes up that, if we take the analogy of a computer screen, a computer screen can emulate, any image, but there's limitations based on the hardware.
A steam engine can emulate many, many things too. And at the beginning of the last century, everybody went gaga over steam engines. Freud and Dali and a computer, but a computer, there's so many things a computer cannot do that, I mean, we could try and torture some analogy out, but it's not going to go very far.
Well, my point was that the limitations or the rules that it follows, you could infer things about the substrate that it's on,
Oh, really? Good.
perhaps.
You could do that certainly, I think, with a computer.
Right. And so can you do the same thing here where
With consciousness?
reality has rules? Yeah.
I don't think so, because consciousness is not reducible. See, computers can be reduced to zeros and ones, and energy piped in from the outside. And there's things that it can't do. I mean, it can't. Some things do not compute, right? And it can't describe a system of which it's a part. So it's foundationally different than consciousness.
Yeah. Yeah.
But what are you going to reduce consciousness to? God is all there is. I say God is another word for consciousness, or for reality. We've known this for millennia. We've just forgotten it all. We got so excited with the Enlightenment, in the 16th, 17th centuries, and we threw out the baby with the bathwater. And so now we've got to catch up for 300 years of brilliant technological advances, no question. Beautiful, gorgeous, no doubt necessary in the larger scheme of things. But ontology and philosophy, by God, it's a big mess.
What's ontology again?
Read it out for the audience. Not computer ontology, but philosophical ontology.
The branch of metaphysics dealing with the nature of being.
The branch of metaphysics dealing with the nature of being. And that's what we do now. We be. I'd be sitting here talking to you. And that being, no, I'm serious. That being is that foundational. That being is the bottom of the end of the line. Being is what is.
Right.
And that's not.
So you're saying the Zoomers have figured it out?
What?
Sorry.
No. What?
The Zoomers talk like that.
Well, good. It's actually more accurate. Yeah. It's okay. Well, it's not just the Zoomers. People have talked like that for a while now. So ontology is a study of what is. What actually is. And then there's the other half, which talks about how do we know something, epistemology. Why don't you read the definition for epistemology so people have this. These are two very important words, epistemology and ontology.
Epistemology, the theory of knowledge, especially with regards to its methods, validity, and scope. Epistemology is the investigation of what distinguishes justified belief from opinion.
So epistemology is the study of how do we know what we know, and how do we know that it's true or justified. Otherwise, it's just opinion. And science right now is having a lot of trouble with both ontology, which is fair. I mean, that's okay. I mean, ontology really is a metaphysical question. What is in reality? Science, though, with epistemology is in a lot of trouble because space and time are like falling out. Because they're not foundational, they're not fundamental. And that should have been obvious immediately after Einstein, but sometimes things take time.
Mm.
Or it should have been obvious with quantum mechanics. It's something else, something spooky's going on here. I mean, if two things can occur on opposite sides of the universe at the same time, with not even the speed of light between them, you know something squirrely's going on.
Mm.
Which is another reason to say that. I mean, now I'm not trying to say that they're not apparent differences and distinctions.
Mm-hmm.
And we can discriminate trees from clouds, obviously. But those are just apparent.
Mm-hmm.
And the student must be able to do both discriminate and not discriminate.
Right.
Follow up?
Well, the thing with epistemology is that everything to prove to know anything that's based off of other, like paths of logic, at some point there's a root of it.
That's an assumption.
And that root is an assumption.
Exactly. So in ontology, we want to get rid of the assumptions. We want to get to what's actually there.
But then the only thing that you can't assume for truth is what is like in front of you right now. Right?
Well, I don't know about in front of me right now, but the fact that that there's experience, or experience B. That's what you could say, which is kind of like I am, but the observer and the observed. People gotta loosen that up a little bit, because the I am implies there's something that's not you or something. I don't know, but you see the point. The point is that experience is what exists.
Mm-hmm.
Experience is consciousness. Now, prove to me that something exists besides experience, and we could both have a great time pulling it apart. But I don't think you're going to find anything.
Right.
In all of the millions, in all of the thousands of years that mankind has searched, experience is all he comes up with.
Well, how is it that when we look at it, all we can know?
Go ahead.
How is it that when we look at it like that, like it seems obvious, all we can know for sure is, experience now.
That's a lot of stuff.
But yet we have all this knowledge based off assumptions that we can't prove that seem to work. We're able to, we have technology and all these things that have built upon assumptions.
What assumptions?
How does anything?
No, it's not assumptions. That's just empirical observation. When Elon designs a rocket, it's not built on assumptions. It's built on empirical observations that if you light a explosive and it pushes out this way, then the rocket goes up, and it goes up by this amount on this planet, given this temperature and this, resistance. It's just observation. It's based on observation. It's not theory. It's just pure, and it's beautiful.
But the assumption is that, what you observe can be taken as a rule or something. Like
A
there's rules
temporary
behind it.
rule, a temporary rule, but there's so many variables. All you have to do is, okay, let's say you have a rocket that's going to go to the moon, and
Hmm.
you do all your calculations. But if the temperature of the Earth were to go down by 5 degrees or up by 10 degrees,
Hmm.
everything would change, and you'd have to do a
Right.
bunch of new calculations, right?
Hmm.
Or if you swapped out the metal or the weight of the metal. So those are all variables that change all the time, and all engineers do is they capture them as long as they can. I mean, I'm not trying to minimize the beauty of
Hmm.
engineering and science. I think they're both wonderful endeavors. But engineers just get things done. They don't worry about the assumptions.
Right.
That's the difference between engineering and science.
Hmm.
Now, in philosophy, sometimes you have people who just want things that seem to work, like we're going to do a moral philosophy or an ethical philosophy. But then you have other philosophers that want to know, what the hell are we doing here? What the hell is this? Where are we? Where are we from? Where are we going? How is this even possible? And that's where philosophy and theology and these things kind of blend together. Or you just have a sincere person who wants to know truth.
Hmm.
And then you end up with, ontology and epistemology and all these other things. But you can put all that aside and just deal with what's given to you as an individual woman or man. But I'm not trying to convince you. I think it's very important that you go through all the steps yourself and see what you come up with. But I don't think you're going to come up with anything different ultimately.
Hmm.
And the other thing I want to do, could you read a little bit of this to folks? Is to introduce
Hmm.
people to this book that will help them with all of this. It's a treasure that no one, it's like priceless diamonds, and nobody knows what their use is or what they're worth. What page are you on?
1492.
Okay, we're in the realm of reality. Good.
Hmm.
Why don't you read a couple oh, is this by Atreya?
Maitreya, yeah.
Okay. You want to read a couple of paragraphs?
Sure.
Flower Ornament Sutra, translated into English not long ago. Priceless text of unspeakable value to the modern world. Go ahead, especially young folks.
In another tower, he saw Maitreya with a group of enlightening beings, bound to be enlightened in one life, telling them
Bound to be
about
enlightened in
coronation.
one life, all right? So there's no reason why kids today can't get enlightened. As a matter of fact, it's the situation's never been better for this. And for to have a great life, but you need a good operating system. And I'm saying, I used to be a psychiatrist. I'm saying this, and a child psychiatrist. This is a great operating system. There are other operating systems, but this one is especially nice for the present and the future. Go ahead. I'm sorry, I interrupted. Start over.
In another tower, he saw Maitreya with a group of enlightening beings, bound to be enlightened in one life, telling them about coronation with the knowledge of all Buddhas. In another tower, he saw Maitreya perambulating ceaselessly for hundreds of thousands of years. In another, he saw him engaged in recitation. In another, engaged in contemplation of doctrine. In another, engaged in exposition of doctrine. In another, engaged in writing down the teaching. In another, absorbed in concentration on universal love. In another, absorbed in all the meditations and immeasurables. In another, absorbed in the points of totality and the liberations. In another tower, he saw Maitreya absorbed in the practice of bringing forth the higher knowledge of enlightening beings. In one tower, he saw enlightening beings absorbed in an enlightening concentration which emanated phantoms, and saw multitudes of all kinds of emanations coming from every pore of their bodies. From the pores of some, he saw multitudes of celestial hosts emerging. From some, he saw multitudes of dragons, goblins, cherubs, titans, birds, minotaurs, serpents, Indras, Brahmas, world guardians, and emperors. From some he saw multitudes of princes. From some he saw multitudes of grandees, ministers, and gentlemen. From some he saw multitudes of hearers, individual illuminates, and enlightening beings. From some he saw multitudes of Buddha bodies. From the pores of some he saw measureless multitudes of phantoms of all sentient beings emerge. He heard various aspects of the teaching being broadcast from the pores of some of the enlightening beings. Teachings of the virtues of enlightening beings, transcendent generosity, discipline, tolerance, vigor, meditation, wisdom, methods, vows, power, knowledge, the means of integration, the immeasurables, concentrations, trance, superknowledge, mystic spells, intellectual powers of analysis and exposition, tranquility and observation, means of liberation, interdependent origination, the reliances, summarization of teachings, the points of mindfulness, the right efforts, the bases of mystic powers, the religious faculties and powers, the limbs of enlightenment, the paths, explanation of the vehicles of hearers, explanation of the vehicle of individual illuminates, explanation of the great vehicle, the stages, tolerances, practices, and vows. In this way, he heard voices expressing all the ways into the teaching being broadcast.
Absolutely gorgeous. Can you see how it's a fractal for the rest of the book? Did you hear him go through the paramitas there? Even at the end there. I mean, so do you have questions about this text?
Not really. I mean, I've been reading it. My understanding is that I just need to read it and it'll have an effect.
It will. It will.
And
but the effect takes time. It's like these different pieces. I'm reminded of some kind of wooden puzzle where there's all these different pieces you have to put together into this cube.
Mhm.
And these pieces, they come from different elements, especially in the modern day. And then with time, they eventually just kind of, they all like fit together. And then all of a sudden it's like,
What do you mean, especially in the modern day?
okay, these days, people don't want to meditate. People
Right.
don't want to, go to the ashram. God is out of fashion. Religion is outdated.
Hmm.
I'm speaking, in gross generalities.
Yeah.
Everybody's rushed for time, and
Mhm.
everything's changing very, very rapidly. Here we have a text that asks only, and what it talks about is enlightenment in one lifetime, okay? And what it asks is that you just simply spend some time with it each day. And I've watched the thing work. I've used it myself. And what it does is without having to do all of the other trappings, the going to the ashram or getting to meditation or sitting, in Zendo or whatever, all that other stuff, your mind is liberated because for example, he was there and he saw Maitreya circumambulating for what, 15,000 years?
Mm.
So right there's a relativity of time. And then he talks about, if you could pick a sentence and I can show you where the book deconditions you and reconditions you to understand the relativity of time, the relativity of space, the illusory nature and the interpenetration of all things into one thing or process or whatever you want to call it. And it rather than teach you, it shows you, and it does it for you if you approach it with the right attitude. And so I can't think of anything. Can you think of anything better for the modern age? It's also very stimulating because it's so beautiful and it's all the senses are involved, the eyes, the ears, the nose, the tongue, the all the senses. It's just it's very comprehensive in mobilizing the entire organism.
Mm.
Something like that. Now, does it take some patience? Yes, but everything does. And I'm saying that this takes less patience than any other method I know of to get enlightened in one lifetime. All right?
Mm-hmm.
Any questions before we stop? It also is a guide for living, right? And how to live properly to where you aren't sabotaging yourself all the time. And it also teaches a
Yeah.
relationship to your fellow women and men that are Buddhas alongside you. And it also has an understanding of this current throughout human existence from the very beginning. Among humans, there's always been this current of knowledge seeking, of truth seeking. And that's part of us too. And now that we can, I mean, you know what it would take to write this book down back then? Much less to translate it. These things are so precious, and they were understood as such back in the day, but we've lost all that. But I think it's hard once you get familiar with this not to see its extraordinary potential and the incredible gift that it is, and symbol of humanity throughout the ages in the same endeavor. Something like that. I hope I'm not going overboard. But I'm serious, I mean it. I really do mean it. All right, sir? Anything else before we stop? Anything else before we stop? I can do one more.
In the Secret of the Golden Flower, the practice of turning the light around, it's
okay.
There's instructions that you do the practice throughout your day in the midst of things.
Yes.
How do you do that practice? And like, say you're talking to somebody, how do you like?
Well,
I have trouble.
One has to be very.
Or
Okay.
if I'm working, like I'm focused on a task, I wouldn't
worry about it.
think of
If
doing
you're
it
completely absorbed in a task that needs to be done or that you're doing, then you don't have to worry about it then. But otherwise, let's say you're going to order a coffee at Starbucks or something. All right, or you're just exchanging pleasantries with somebody, and it's all kind of ritualistic courtesies or whatever. Or you can reserve part of your consciousness to be behind the part. But see, what this requires is that you be comfortable in your own skin. You can't be anxious. You can't be scared. You can't be worried. You can't be. Once you're comfortable in your own skin, it's kind of like so let's take a master boxer or martial artist person, and they're at the level of world champion or whatever. Not all of them is involved in the fighting in the moment. Part of them is reserved to monitor their energy level, to monitor what round this is, to monitor the crowd or the or not. So you don't put 100% of your energy of your mental energy onto what you're doing. There's some of it that's reserved in the back. So that's how you divide up the energy. And depending on what you're doing, you may or may not be able to do it at all. But if you're totally comfortable in your skin, and let's say you're going to Starbucks, you're ordering your coffee, they ask you your name or whatever they do, and you can do that, and then part of you's watching the whole thing. So it's a kind of a meta awareness. Now, instead of using that meta awareness to focus on a particular variable, like the amount of time the number of rounds that have passed, or how long since the bell rang or whatever. You use it instead to rest in the consciousness that embeds the whole thing. So another way of saying this is, rather than put all your energy on the content of consciousness, have some of it rest in consciousness without an object.
But you're saying that doesn't apply if I'm doing deep work.
No. If you're doing deep work, that's what you're doing.
Okay.
And eventually it won't be you doing it. You'll notice it's not you doing it. It's much more magical than all that. When you're really working, at the end of it, you go, wow. And the time just flew by because you weren't there.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, the self is grossly overestimated. Okay, sir?
Yeah. Thank you.
All right. Hasta luego. Take good care. Guard your mind out there. It's
Bye.
going nuts. Take care. Bye bye.
Yeah.